On the night of January 10th, 49 BC, a man stood at the edge of a small river in northern Italy. Behind him, a single legion, 5,000 infantry, 300 cavalry. Ahead of him, Rome, the most powerful state in the Western world. And between the two, a shallow stream called the Rubicon. Crossing it meant war. Crossing it meant treason in the eyes of the Senate. Crossing it meant there was no going back, ever. He crossed it, and within 4 years, Julius Caesar would destroy every army sent against him, chase his enemies across 3 continents, and remake the Roman Republic into something it had never been before. A dictatorship built on the shoulders of one man's extraordinary mind. But let's not start at the river. Let's start with how Rome got to the point where a single general could tear it apart. By the middle of the 1st century BC, the Roman Republic was cracking from the inside. The old system, senators, consuls, the careful balance of shared power, was buckling under the weight of its own contradictions. Slavery, inequality, corruption, and the growing power of military commanders had hollowed the Republic out. Something had to give. The attempted fix was a power-sharing arrangement, a triumvirate, between 3 of the most powerful men in Rome: Pompey, Crassus, and Caesar. Pompey was the established military hero, the man who had swept the pirates from the Mediterranean and reorganized the East. Crassus was the richest man in Rome, a financier and political operator with deep ambitions and a fragile ego. And Caesar, elected consul, was the rising star, brilliant, ambitious, charismatic, and dangerous. The deal carved the Roman world into 3 spheres. Caesar received Gaul. Pompey took the 2 Spanish provinces. Crassus got Syria, and with it, the dream that consumed him. The conquest of Parthia, Bactria, India, the very edge of the known world. Caesar went to work immediately. In 58 BC, he defeated the Helvetii, an entire migrating nation, and then crushed a Germanic confederation led by the fearsome chieftain Ariovistus. The following year, he conquered Belgium. Campaign after campaign, victory after victory, Caesar was building something in Gaul, not just a conquered territory, but a personal army, loyal to him and him alone. Meanwhile, Crassus marched east, chasing glory. He crossed the Tigris with 40,000 men, pushing deep into Mesopotamian desert. And there, at Carrhae, in 53 BC, the Parthian general Surenas was waiting for him. The Roman army was surrounded, shattered, annihilated, 20,000 killed, 10,000 captured. It was the worst Roman military disaster since Hannibal had destroyed their legions at Carrhae over a century and a half earlier. Crassus was dead, and with him died the fragile balance that had kept the Triumvirate together. Now it was just 2 men, Caesar and Pompey, and Rome wasn't big enough for both. In 52 BC, Gaul erupted in revolt. A young Gallic nobleman named Vercingetorix united the tribes and raised an army that threatened to undo everything Caesar had built. Caesar responded with a campaign of ruthless brilliance, cornering Vercingetorix at the hilltop fortress of Alesia and besieging him with a double ring of fortifications, one facing inward to trap the Gauls, one facing outward to repel the massive relief army that came to break the siege. It worked. Vercingetorix surrendered. Gaul was subdued, and now Caesar was more powerful and more dangerous than ever. The Senate watched this with growing alarm. Caesar's victories made him a hero to the Roman people, but to the senators, he was a threat, an authoritarian personality backed by a battle-hardened army. They preferred Pompey, less dynamic, less brilliant, but more manageable, more controllable. On paper, the balance of power favored Pompey and the Senate overwhelmingly. Pompey had 8 legions in Spain, 2 in Italy, plus additional legions stationed across Macedonia, Syria, and Africa. When Caesar made his decision to march on Rome on November 26th, 50 BC, he had exactly 1 legion at his disposal. 5,000 foot soldiers, 300 horsemen, that was it. But Caesar knew something the Senate didn't fully grasp. Pompey's 2 legions in Italy existed mostly on paper. He had the organizational framework, the standards, the officer corps, but not the actual soldiers to fill the ranks. And the Roman people, tired of senatorial corruption and dazzled by Caesar's victories, were on his side. So Caesar crossed the Rubicon, and he moved fast. Pompey and the Senate, instead of standing and fighting at Rome, which would have been strategically sound, panicked. They retreated south to Capua, trying to gather forces as they went. It was their first mistake, and arguably their greatest. By abandoning Rome, they handed Caesar the political and symbolic heart of the Republic without a fight. At Corfinium, Pompey left a detachment of troops to slow Caesar down. But Caesar advanced so rapidly that he cut the road between Corfinium and Capua, isolating those troops completely. Pompey, rather than marching back to relieve them, continued retreating, this time all the way to the fortified port of Brundisium on the Adriatic coast. Corfinium surrendered. Caesar swept south. Now, some historians have criticized what Caesar did next. He marched directly toward Pompey, a straight-line approach that revealed his intentions and gave his opponent time to react. A more indirect route, feints and misdirection, might have trapped Pompey before he could escape. But Caesar was Caesar. He was impetuous. He trusted speed over subtlety. And in this case, it cost him, because Pompey and the Senate managed to cross the Adriatic into Greece before Caesar could catch them. Caesar stood at Brundisium, watching the last of Pompey's ships disappear over the horizon. His enemy had escaped. But Caesar didn't chase, not yet. He turned around and did something that revealed the depth of his strategic thinking, something that separates great tacticians from great strategists. He went to Spain first. Pompey's real military foundation, the source of his legions, his recruits, his supplies, was in Spain. If Caesar chased Pompey to Greece, he would leave those Spanish legions free to sail to Italy or reinforce Pompey from behind. The threat would hang over him like a blade. Caesar summed up his reasoning in a single sentence, one of the most famous in military history. I am going to fight an army without a general, so I can return to fight a general without an army. He was betting on Pompey's inactivity, and the bet paid off. In Spain, Pompey's lieutenants Afranius and Varro commanded the legions. Caesar didn't smash them in a pitched battle. Instead, he outmaneuvered them, cutting supply lines, isolating their forces, making their position untenable. Afranius capitulated. Varro surrendered shortly after because both his soldiers and the local population wanted it. As Napoleon would later observe, this kind of bloodless victory, destroying an army equal to your own through maneuver alone, is something that can only happen in a civil war, where the enemy's troops are your own countrymen and can be persuaded to switch sides. Caesar left 4 legions to hold Spain, marched back to southern Gaul, besieged, and took Marseille, and now, finally, turned his full attention east. His back was covered, his flanks were secure. It was time to deal with Pompey. But getting to Greece wasn't simple. Caesar had 2 options: march overland along the Dalmatian coast, which was safe but slow, or cross the Adriatic by sea, which was faster but enormously risky. His fleet was smaller than Pompey's. He could only transport half his army in a single crossing. Caesar chose the sea. On January 4th, 48 BC, he loaded 20,000 infantry and 600 cavalry onto his ships, without supplies, and crossed the Adriatic. It was an act of breathtaking audacity. Pompey couldn't believe anyone would attempt something so reckless. By the time he reacted, Caesar was already on Greek soil. But now Caesar was in a precarious position. Half his army was in Greece. The other half, under Mark Antony, was still in Italy, waiting for the fleet to return. And Pompey's navy destroyed part of that fleet. For a moment, it looked like Caesar might be stranded, outnumbered, undersupplied, cut off from reinforcements. Mark Antony, however, managed to get the remaining legions across despite the losses. Pompey, slow and cautious as always, failed to prevent the 2 forces from joining up. Caesar now had his full army, but he was still outnumbered. What followed was a bold and ultimately failed attempt by Caesar to trap Pompey. He tried to encircle the larger army with earthworks, miles of trenches and fortifications designed to cut Pompey off from the surrounding countryside and the sea. It was an ambitious plan, but Pompey's force was too large, the area too vast. The encirclement couldn't hold. In July of 48 BC, Pompey broke out and won a genuine victory at Dyrrhachium. Caesar's troops were thrown back. His fortifications were breached. For the first time in the campaign, Caesar had been beaten. Pompey now had a golden opportunity. Caesar's fleet was destroyed. The road to Italy lay open. He could have crossed back, reclaimed Rome, and forced Caesar to fight on his terms. But Pompey hesitated, and Caesar, sensing the danger with the instincts of a predator, moved first. Instead of retreating, he marched inland toward Macedonia, where Pompey's lieutenant Scipio was stationed with additional forces. It was a calculated provocation. Caesar was daring Pompey to follow him. Pompey followed. He linked up with Scipio, and now, with the Senate's senators pressing him, demanding a decisive battle, pointing to the victory at Dyrrhachium, pointing to his massive numerical advantage, Pompey agreed to fight. The two armies met at Pharsalus. Pompey had 45,000 infantry and 7,000 cavalry, 110 cohorts in total. Caesar had 22,000 infantry and just 1,000 cavalry, 80 cohorts. On paper, it shouldn't have been close. But Caesar had something Pompey didn't, a plan that accounted for every weakness and turned his enemy's greatest strength into a trap. He deployed his army with the left wing anchored on the river Enipeus, which had steep, unclimbable banks. No attack could come from that direction. Mark Antony commanded the left. Domitius Calvinus held the center. Publius Sulla took the right wing. The infantry was arranged in the standard 3 lines, but Caesar held the third line back as a general reserve, to be committed only on his personal command. The critical point was the right wing. That's where the open ground was. That's where Pompey had massed his 7,000 cavalry, along with archers and slingers, under the command of Labienus. The plan was obvious. Overwhelm Caesar's tiny cavalry force, sweep around his right flank, and roll up his entire army from behind. Caesar saw it coming, and he prepared a counter that was as elegant as it was deadly. He placed his 1,000 cavalry on the right wing, as expected, but behind them, hidden from Pompey's view, he positioned 6 elite cohorts at an oblique angle. He gathered these men personally and told them, in plain terms, that the outcome of the entire battle depended on what they did in the next few hours. Here was the sequence. Pompey's cavalry would charge. Caesar's smaller force would resist as long as possible, then fall back in good order. The moment the enemy horsemen surged forward past the retreating cavalry, the 6 hidden cohorts would strike them from the flank. And because cavalry that has just broken into a charge is nearly impossible to stop and redirect, the impact would be devastating. On August 9th, 48 BC, the battle began. Pompey's lines stood still. Caesar, expecting an attack that didn't come, advanced his first 2 lines halfway across the field, then halted, waiting. Still nothing. So Caesar attacked first. Now Pompey's cavalry charged, 7,000 horsemen thundering toward Caesar's right flank. Caesar's 1,000 cavalrymen fought, absorbed the impact, and then pulled back, exactly as planned. Labienus's riders surged forward, sensing victory. And then the 6 cohorts hit them from the side. The effect was instantaneous. Pompey's cavalry, caught mid-charge, disintegrated. Horses wheeled and crashed into each other. Riders were thrown. The formation shattered. Behind them, the archers and slingers, now exposed without cavalry protection, were cut to pieces. Meanwhile, along the entire front, the 2 infantry forces had been grinding against each other in brutal close-quarters combat. Pompey made a critical error. He committed all his infantry at once, holding nothing back. Caesar's soldiers, outnumbered but better trained and harder, fought the larger force to a standstill. And then, When exhaustion was settling over both armies like a fog, Caesar gave the order. The third line, fresh, rested, waiting, surged forward into the fight. At the same time, the 6 cohorts that had destroyed Pompey's cavalry wheeled inward and struck the enemy infantry from the flank. Pompey's center buckled. Then it broke. The rout was total. Pompey himself had already fled to his camp, and then beyond it. Caesar, tireless even in victory, drove his men forward, pursuing, encircling, accepting surrenders. When the dust settled, Pompey had lost 15,000 dead and wounded. The rest were captured or submitted. Caesar lost 200 men. Pompey boarded a ship and fled to Egypt. Caesar followed. But by the time he arrived, Pompey was dead, assassinated by Egyptian courtiers trying to curry favor with the winning side. They presented Caesar with Pompey's severed head. According to the ancient sources, Caesar wept. In Egypt, Caesar became entangled in the power struggle between Cleopatra and her brother, a detour that cost him several precious months and nearly cost him his life. While he lingered in Alexandria, Pompey's surviving lieutenants regrouped. They raised new armies in North Africa and Spain. The war was far from over. Caesar sailed to Africa with a small force, found himself surrounded at one point by Labienus, the same commander who had led Pompey's cavalry at Pharsalus, and fought a grueling campaign of attrition. On April 6, 46 BC, he won the Battle of Pharsalus, breaking the last major concentration of Republican forces in Africa. Labienus fled to Spain. Caesar followed. At Munda on March 17, 45 BC, in what Caesar himself reportedly called the only battle where he fought not for victory, but for his life, the last Republican army was destroyed. Labienus was killed. The civil war was over. The Roman Republic, centuries old, built on the principle that no one man should hold absolute power, was finished. In its place stood a dictatorship, and at its center, one extraordinary, terrifying mind. Caesar had plans, enormous plans. He intended to march against the Dacians, the powerful kingdom north of the Danube, and then east against the Parthians, to avenge Crassus and finish what the dead Triumvirate had failed to achieve. None of it happened. On March 15, 44 BC, the Ides of March, Julius Caesar walked into the Senate, and there, surrounded by the men he had defeated, pardoned, and elevated, he was stabbed 23 times. He died at the base of Pompey's statue. In the same year, far to the north, another king also fell. Burebista, the ruler of the Dacian kingdom, the very target of Caesar's next campaign, was assassinated by his own people. 2 empires lost their leaders in the same breath, and history turned, once again, on the edge of a knife.